Guys, I completely forgot to say this when I was recording the intro to this very special episode. This is the 2-year anniversary of the Handbook, the Operations podcast. So a massive thank you to those of you that have been here since the beginning and to any of you that are new listeners as well. Really appreciate it. Please share this podcast with anyone in the agency, consultancy, or professional services space that you think would get value out of this show. And if you haven't done so or haven't done so recently, please rate the podcast on Apple or Spotify. It'll help us reach even more listeners and viewers. Now, let's get into the episode. Hi all, welcome back to the Handbook, the Operations podcast. I'm Harv Nagra. This is a very special episode, but I want to start with a true story. In fact, it's my story. I came up through my career on the delivery side. Digital producer, digital director, and then getting gradually more involved in the behind the scenes until I moved into operations. My strengths were in project management, people, processes, systems, the traditional operational disciplines. But beyond pulling together a decent quote, tracking project burn, or pulling together a utilization report, my confidence around the numbers was pretty low. When our finance director would screen share the P&L in a leadership meeting, I'd feel a knot in my stomach. And the thing is, I'd glance around the table and notice I wasn't the only one struggling to keep up. There were other senior leaders in that room doing exactly the same thing, keeping quiet, looking slightly confused, not quite sure where to focus or what it all meant. When it came to reporting, I was almost entirely looking backwards. When it came to forecasting, I leaned far too heavily on our finance director. And if someone even said the word rev rec, I felt panic. It sounded technical and complicated, and nobody had ever properly explained it to me. I don't think I was incompetent. I just had a gap in my knowledge. The maturity gap report we published in April 2026 proved that this wasn't just a me problem, nor a problem just with people in my last workplace, but an industry-wide problem in agencies and consultancies. So other than despair, what do we actually do? We asked ourselves that question. What if we could level up together? Why does this financial knowledge need to be so rare? That question led me to start talking to FinOps expert Rich Brett. He's been on the podcast before, and some of you might follow him on LinkedIn. He's brilliant, and he talks all about finance and operations coming together. Well, together, we created what we're calling the Missing Finance Scores, a completely free resource for everyone in your agency, consultancy, or professional services firm, hosted at learn.scoro.com. Because as Rich puts it, the numbers aren't the hard part. The hard part is that nobody ever explained them properly. There are 3 paths in this course. FinOps for leadership, for founders, MDs, ops, and finance leaders. A shorter FinOps for delivery path for project managers, delivery leads, and account directors. And finally, even FinOps essentials for individual contributors and specialists. It's a short 30-minute track for the people doing the work who've never had the financial context properly explained to them. All of it designed to be integrated into your team training and staff onboarding. Today, you're going to hear one of the conversations Rich and I have inside the course. These discussions kick off every module, setting the scene for what we're about to cover and why it matters. If you're ready, let's get into it. Rich, in this course, we cover a lot of territory pretty efficiently. Why is it so important that everyone in the business understands this stuff?
It's important because everyone actually has a small part to play in it. Just because you might be a junior account executive, the decisions you make will have an impact. But more importantly, the way you communicate will have a bigger impact. Is if you spot something, then tell someone that. And it's the same with spending money. I think if you think about a business and spending money, you don't just willingly do it if it's your own money. So how come when you're in a business, do you just willingly spend money without seeing the value? So I think what I like to say to people that I work with is make sure that every pound you spend adds value. And most of the time, it's the more junior members who might be doing that spending because they're the ones who have to order something from a supplier or they're the ones who have to book in a bit of resource. Consider what's the budget, what is my involvement in making this business money? And the reason why they think, what difference does it make to me? Well, it does, because if the business you work for makes money, in all likelihood, that will then filter through to you and your team and the way that you work in the business, whether that is a pay rise or a bonus, or it's just extra nice beers in the fridge or eggs for breakfast. Who knows what it might be? It could even just be training. But I think if you show a willingness to understand a commercial awareness, that does also set you apart from everybody else. So I think it's important to be embedded, because if everyone's going towards the same goal, it's more likely that you'll succeed.
Maybe it's just my experience, but I've rarely come across a business that has done that very well. Part of the reason, I suppose, why we're creating this course, I mean, you speak to a lot of professional services firms, agencies, consultancies. Do you see many that take that approach of kind of educating the full team?
No. Most of the time it's just the owner and
Yeah.
a couple of senior leaders who are touching the numbers. And even then, there's not always that much understanding of them. Most people who are running professional service business, agencies, consultants, didn't do it to run numbers. They did it to deliver a service because they've got a certain skill set, whether that's creative, strategy, design, whatever it might be. But yeah, most of them aren't doing it. I mean, we were lucky at my old agency at We Are Social. We kind of had an approach that was, especially I know that I did them within the finance team, which is I kind of wanted it that if people left the business, no matter what role they played in that business, if they went to the next job, that the company who hired them went, wow, these guys really understand the commercials. And that was like, it wasn't always possible. There were some people who really just didn't give a shit, and that's fine. But actually, a lot of those people suddenly were like, well, I'm asking quite interesting questions about, well, why does it matter if I spend more time? Like, you're not paying me any more money. It's like, yeah, but we could be getting paid more money by the client.
Right.
And also, why are you working longer hours? I think it's quite a good approach to just think, I want people to leave this business thinking, wow, that company really trained their team well. And that just builds credentials for you, that if there are people in that business who then want to move to a different company, they might go, I want to go and work for those guys. And I think that is, you should always just be trying to get people to build their understanding over and above what their role is within the business. Because ultimately, most of those people will at some point be a senior leader in a business if they stick to it. So they're going to have to learn it at some point.
Yeah. To your point, I think there's a lot of people that become accidental founders of a professional services business, so they never had the training.
Nope.
But a lot of us do get promoted, and I talk a lot to operations people, and everyone has a very different journey into operations. You know, there's no kind of formal training at the moment, so everyone's kind of graduated through their business until they become an ops person.
Yeah.
And so so often that financial gap is very what's the word I'm looking for? Just there's a huge financial gap in understanding. So the purpose of this course in some ways is to talk about those two worlds coming together, finance and operations and FinOps.
Yep.
So we see this term occasionally, but maybe not often enough. Hopefully after this course that will be more prevalent and better understood. But that's really what we're trying to do, right? Is ensure that everyone has this kind of FinOps understanding, the merging of these two worlds. But I think even perhaps finance people sometimes maybe I'm
Careful.
maybe maybe I'm not being fair, but they don't always take as much interest in the operational side of things.
No.
So it's not just the ops people or the founders or the senior leaders, but it's also the finance team needs to care more about what's happening in operations so they understand the full picture.
I worked in finance teams for a long time, and there's a way to approach it. And I think a lot of finance people have got this image of just sitting by their desks, tapping on spreadsheets and saying no.
Yeah.
What we were trying to do was to try and get our finance people and our finance team from quite a junior level sitting with the teams, understanding how the business actually worked, not how it worked in a spreadsheet.
Right.
And I think, I'll be honest, if a finance team isn't good at communicating to the business, especially in professional services, when you've often got a lot younger people in the business, especially in more creative roles, if that team can't find a way to communicate the importance of commercials, they're not doing a great job. And I do actually think generally the standard can be quite low. A lot of finance people come from an accountancy background. They sit, they do their spreadsheets, they do month end, they make sure the numbers make sense. But actually the numbers make more sense if you actually know where they come from. So FinOps and business partnering, as it was called, is about getting finance to be closer to the business. But it's not it's not a one-way street. It's up to finance to do that. FinOps is about both of those sides working together. An ops system or a finance system aligning a process that is sort of an operations process that then checks, but how would this work with finance? Those are just those small adjustments that make such a big difference when you suddenly look at a number and go, yes, that makes sense, or why doesn't that make sense? You can then just go and look over there. And I think FinOps has been around for years as a thing, but it was called other things, business partnering, financial planning analysis, whatever you want to call it. But really, it's just about trying to get closer to the numbers, and closer to numbers actually mean something. But also the other side is getting ops to be more aware of what they're doing and how that affects the numbers. So it's kind of circular.
Yeah. And we were talking about like the whole organization needing to be kind of brought into the fold and educated and all that kind of stuff. That goes hand in hand with communicating results to the team as well, right? People need to be aware of how the business is doing and not surprised by it. I've seen kind of annual summaries, and it's so rare that like the numbers are presented that people end up just kind of staring really closely at the screen and a bit confused. And then everyone's expecting bonuses, and it's like, well, what does that mean? It looks like you made so much money, but like it's like you just haven't communicated that throughout the year, first of all. And second of all, even when it is communicated, it's kind of just glazed over and it leaves more questions than answers.
Bear in mind that's most of the time because most businesses don't know the numbers until the end of the year because they're not doing what we've talked about in this course on a monthly basis until you get to a certain size. But also, you've got to remember that transparency works both ways. It can't just be we only talk about the good stuff. We've got to talk about the bad stuff as well. And I think doing that makes a big difference. I think if you only present good numbers but don't give bonuses, then how does that work? If you present bad numbers but give bonuses as well, that doesn't make sense. You've got to try and be clear, but also you've got to try and keep it simple. And often a problem is that those people who are presenting that maybe don't know the numbers that well themselves either, but they know that they have to do an annual review and present the numbers to the team. Make sure that if you're doing that, you know what you're talking about and what your plan is. What's the thing that you want those people listening to get out of it? We've had a good year, but it's not been as good as we hoped it would be. We're not going to pay any bonuses. Or it's been a good year, we're going to pay bonuses, but they might be held back a couple of months. Whatever it might be, you just want to make sure that you're clear with people, because no one wants to leave thinking, oh, we're screwed, I'm going to go and look for another job. Unless that's what you want to try and get people to do, but you shouldn't really be doing that either.
And I think this points to a non-finance skill, which is just communications. We need to get so good at that in our roles, not just with clients, but internally. I just always think that you need to be such a good storyteller, and that's not about making shit up, but it's about being able to communicate what's actually happening with people in a way that they can understand, right?
So I think finance people are guilty of looking for variances in numbers and saying, oh, the reason why we're down is because we spent an extra £65 on apples this year. Like, who cares? Like, in some ways, that's quite an interesting piece of information to know that you have it to that level of detail, but most people don't care about that stuff. It's like, well, where are we actually going to go? You've got to make the numbers relevant and understandable. I remember when I was first presenting this back in one of my old jobs, we equated the value of missing timesheets to a car each month. And we were talking about the value of timesheets is £200,000 that we're missing. Suddenly people were like, whoa, we're missing £200,000 worth of timesheets. We could buy a house, we could buy a car with that. Suddenly it actually made more sense that time is revenue that we can't see. And I think that sometimes timesheets are seen as a bad thing, but actually it's a really good way for people to understand what you're actually selling, because you are selling time most of the time. But yeah, I think it's the narrative. And it's a really crucial part of finance is communication. I'll admit it, a lot of finance people aren't great at it. They don't want to have to stand up on a stage and talk about numbers. They don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to sit at home and do their spreadsheets. I think you've got to try and encourage that out of your finance person. And if you haven't got that, look for someone who is willing to do that. I think the best businesses are probably supported by a finance team who are embedded in the business. That doesn't mean going for drinks on a Friday night every time. It just means, and being the person who holds the credit card, it's actually someone who knows the people in the business, knows what their problems are, and tries to solve them and works with them rather than just pushing against them the whole time.
That's another thing I hope people take away from this course, that no one watching this is expected to become, a finance or FinOps expert, right? But what the point is, everyone needs to be part of the conversation, working towards the same mission, but also working together. So, don't be watching this as a finance person and thinking, okay, well, these are my skills and now I have this knowledge, and nor as an ops person just sitting there. The point is that you need to start working together. And, as a finance person, you can tell a better story if you're sitting next to the ops person and working together to understand this and getting that picture together, right?
As a finance person, you can't do this by yourself. Like, if you know all this stuff, you have to go and you can't go and find out exactly why something happened. You're going to have to especially as you get bigger, you're going to have to look around and have people who you can talk to and say, what happened here? And if that person isn't able to answer that or know how to get that information, then you've got to then think, we've got a problem here. This person doesn't know how to answer the question of why did this happen. The route now is we need to teach this person how to find out why did this happen.
Yeah.
Have we got the systems in place to do it? But yeah, it's really about a lot of running a good business is about communication. And as you get bigger, it becomes even more important. That is why businesses over and above 1 million, 10 people start to struggle. It's because the person who runs it isn't able to hear everything going on and go, don't do that. And especially in a more hybrid post-COVID world, you're not even in the same room as these people that often. So you're not going to catch a conversation on Zoom unless you just keep your Zoom open every day.
Yeah.
No one's doing that. So I think it is trying to build those routes to communicate and explain things as much as you can.
And we were alluding to this a few moments ago with regards to people coming up through a business to become ops leaders and stuff like that. And we've been picking a lot on kind of finance people in this conversation, perhaps. But I think also for ops people,
I'm allowed to pick on finance people, by the way.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think also for ops people, like it's important to realize that your role is not just about firefighting and technology and processes and stuff like that. It is about business performance.
Yeah.
So if you want to run a mature business and if you want to be on that kind of high maturity end of your operational role and be growing in your career as an ops person, you have to think about business performance.
Yeah, I think you have to. And I think that goes for most roles within professional services business. Unfortunately, I've met a lot of people who've come in quite senior and you quickly realize they have no idea of commercials. And that's a problem because you kind of expect them to, but that's because you don't necessarily have to. Finance might take all that away from you, or it might not be that it's needed at all because the business just solves it in a different way. But I think if you want to progress in your career and help a business grow better, a full awareness of commercials, and especially at that senior level, an understanding of your influence on the numbers is pretty much a crucial part of your business.
Something that you've said that I quite like is that even kind of on an individual contributor level, people get promoted faster when they take an interest in the numbers and stuff. That was kind of like, I've never really heard anybody say that. Can you just very briefly...
Maybe I shouldn't have said
it. Can you briefly just tell us why you think that is, or what that point of view is about?
I think it just shows interest. I think it's easy to just do your job. I think a designer is a really good example. You know, work with designers who are very much about the design. They spend hours and hours perfecting it. You know,
I'm an artist.
We've all had many challenges where designers say, well, I needed to spend an extra 30 hours on it because it wasn't perfect. Okay, but commercially that doesn't work for us because we had other work that we needed you to do. You're not getting paid for it. So then actually if you have that conversation and they start to realize that, they might take that down to 10 hours, or the next time they quote it, they might then do it for more hours to allow that, or they might figure out a different way of doing it. So I think the important thing is that you're more likely, I think you're more likely to get promoted with that stuff if you do both, right? You can't be a shit designer but know the commercials. But it still could be quite helpful because if you understand the commercial side of it, you might be better at managing a design team. But if you've got that more commercial understanding of how you impact and your role impacts the business, you're going to be a much more important part of that business than someone who just does one thing. Most businesses aren't just looking for someone to do one or two things. If they can be doing one or two things plus have a commercial awareness, it does make sense that you're going to be better at running teams and being able to make better decisions. And ultimately, as you get more senior, the accountability and responsibility you have becomes bigger.
Right.
If you aren't able to make good commercial decisions, then you're not going to make good decisions. Like you have to be able to understand that stuff. And I think that is why, unfortunately, finance people sometimes get put into these positions is because they do understand the whole business. If you can be a client services or a delivery person or a creative or a strategist or whatever you might be, but understand the commercials, that's only going to help you move up to more senior levels where you're going to have bigger responsibility for bigger decisions and bigger discussions.
Well, there you go. We've called out everybody in this discussion.
We might as well, you know.
Individual contributors,
Good
finance,
luck.
ops, senior leaders, everyone.
I think everyone, most people don't want to just do their job. Most people do want to get promoted. I think there will be some people who just love design and therefore they don't really care about it. And that's fine. But if you really care about that, but you just have a little bit of an understanding of how it all fits within the wider machine, that's all you need. You don't need to be an expert. It's just an understanding of what your role is within that business.
Yeah. I just think it's really exciting to think about the idea that, like, you know, people could be watching this course, you know, asking their colleagues to watch, and just like I can imagine kind of the change in attitude that might come into an organization when everyone from, you know, top of the organization to the ICs cares
Yeah.
and remembers that we're here to make money and we're on a mission together, and it's not just about my salary and my paycheck and my tasks.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of times in business, people forget that the idea of the business is to make money.
Yeah.
And they lose that, and they think actually it's for me to get paid. It is to get paid, and it is to do your job. But ultimately, a business doesn't keep going if it's not making money, and everyone does contribute to that, even if it's even in a small part. You know, the more junior members might only be a small percentage compared to the more senior people. But if a business isn't making money, then you're not going to get paid at the end of the month because they won't be able to pay your salary. So I think everyone has an involvement in it. The level of which they are involved will differ, but you do have to remember that someone has to make money. That's how the world spins around, unfortunately.
Excellent. That's just a taste of the course, and I hope it gives you a sense of what Rich and I have put together. Over the coming weeks, we'll be releasing more of these conversations here on the podcast, so there's plenty more to come. But don't wait for those. Head to learn.scoro.com, take a look at the course and the 3 learning paths, and get your team watching. Whether that's integrating it into your new starter onboarding or rolling it out as team training, there's something in here for everyone, from the leadership team right down to the individual contributors doing the work day to day. Even finance people will find benefit. They might already know the concepts, but this course will help them better understand the operational side of the business and help them communicate better with the rest of the team. This course is free. It lets you track your progress. There are quizzes to reinforce your learning, and you get a Rich Brett certified certificate at the end. I'm super proud of what we've created. Rich has done an exceptional job of making this material feel accessible and relevant, and I think the value here is huge, both for the people watching and for the business they're a part of. Once again, that's learn.scoro.com. That's it from me this week. I'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, take care. This podcast is brought to you by Scoro, a platform designed for agencies and consultancies, which allows you to manage your projects, finances, and resources, all from one system. This is a platform I brought in at a previous workplace, which completely transformed the way we worked, and which I've recommended to clients of my own. You can sign up for a free trial on Scoro.com. That's SCORO.com. Or reach out to me, Harv Nagra, on LinkedIn if you'd like to hear about some of my experiences.